Every day, as usual, I was waiting for my boyfriend Jake in front of the college. Just then, someone said, "Emily, don't you want to go home?" When I turned around, Jake was standing in front of me. He used to drop me home every day after college. Since I lived alone away from my parents, Jake always took care of me like a good friend. Perhaps it was his friendship that I liked so much, and as we spent more time together, I began to develop feelings for him. Gradually, our friendship turned into love. There was a Dominos pizza store in front of our college where we used to spend time every day. I still remember the day I first came to college and spent time at that famous Domino's pizza store. Some boys tried to tease me, but at that moment, Jake was there to confront them and explain not to bother a girl in such a way. Since then, we have become good friends. Now it's our 3rd year in college, and we've been in a relationship for 3 years. Even today, we love each other just as much. Jake is quite romantic. Even now, he has the habit of surprising me with flowers or expressing his love by writing, "I love you, Emily," on a car outside the college. One day, as I was waiting for Jake as usual, I heard a voice from behind saying, "I love you, Emily." Upon hearing this, I turned around to look, but no one was there. At that moment, my eyes caught a car with a message written on it, "Emily, I love you very much. We will meet soon." Seeing this, I said to myself, Jake again. He must be up to some mischief. Then I continued waiting for Jake. After a while, James came to pick me up. We were talking about our day when I mentioned the incident. He was surprised, and his reaction left me puzzled too. He said, "But today I didn't do anything mischievous." Hearing this, I thought, if Jake didn't write "I love you" behind the car, then who played this prank? I was still contemplating when Jake said, "It seems someone played a prank on you today. Both of us thought someone teased us, but we were unaware that this prank would create trouble for me one day." On that day, as usual, Jake dropped me home, and as I lay in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the incident. At that moment, I received a call from Jake, and we started talking. Unaware of the time passing, we realized it was already 2 a.m. Despite the late hour, our conversation continued. Suddenly, my doorbell rang. I immediately hung up the phone, thinking it might be my neighbor, Aunt Luna, who often comes over after drinking, asking for her house keys. With that thought in mind, I went to the door. I assumed Aunt Luna had come to ask for her house keys, as she often did. Thinking this, I opened the door. However, to my surprise, there was no one there, just a bouquet with a note. The note read, "I am your ex, and will meet you soon." This surprised me because I hadn't spoken to my ex for years. After our breakup, he had moved to another country. I couldn't understand why my ex would make such a move. As I was about to close the door, a man of around 40 years suddenly appeared in front of me. Seeing him, I asked, "Who are you, and what are you doing outside my house like this?" Immediately, he looked at me angrily with his red eyes and said, "How can you forget me, Emily? I'm your ex." His words surprised me, and I tried to push him away, attempting to close the door. However, my attempt was unsuccessful as he had a knife in his hand. He forcefully pushed me to the ground. I lay helpless on the floor, crying. As I looked at the man in his 40s, I noticed he was wearing a black coat and holding a knife approaching me. Seeing this, I panicked, as if I had understood that something wrong was about to happen to me. With fear in my mind, I told the man, "It seems there is a misunderstanding. I'm not your ex. Please leave me alone." With this hope, I thought maybe he would spare me. However, I was wrong. The madman, in anger, held the knife against my throat and said, "I love you, Emily. I used to pray to meet you every day when I saw you leaving college." Seeing his aggressive actions, I tried to push him away. but he grabbed my legs and pushed me towards the wall. By this time, I had already suffered a head injury, and I was quite scared. Just then, I felt a sigh of relief when suddenly I heard the siren of a police car. Upon hearing the police siren, the man tried to escape, but 2 police officers arrived and apprehended him. Finally, I realized that I was safe. In anger, I approached the man and gave him a strong blow. Then it struck me. I hadn't called the police, so how did they arrive? This thought lingered in my mind when, in a matter of moments, Jake appeared in front of me. Seeing Jake amidst all this chaos, I was surprised at that moment. I quickly ran towards him and hugged him tightly. "Are you okay, Emily?" Jake asked me. "Yes, Jake, I'm fine. But how did you find out about all this?" I asked him. With his hand on my head, Jake replied, "Thank God you were talking to me on the call, and when you hung up, you didn't end my call, so I could hear everything happening in your room." At that moment, I immediately called the police. Hearing this, a smile appeared on my face. If Jake hadn't called the police, I couldn't imagine what might have happened to me. I thanked him, and then the police took the crazy man to the police station. Further investigation revealed that he was a psycho wanted by the police for many years. Now that psycho man is behind bars for good. After everything that happened, finally, Jake and I spent some time at the famous Dominos pizza in front of the college, and now everything seemed normal again, just like before.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. I witnessed this incident about 2 years ago when I was in Dominos with my wife and kids. That incident took my soul out of me and my kids, but there was a twist that shocked us the most. Listen to my story and you will know on your own. The first phase of Corona struck New York City, and most people were getting infected, so the government restricted almost every public place, restaurant, and park. We were kind of living in fear of getting infected every day. I had great responsibilities upon me, and thanks to my luck that my work was completely IT-based, so the lockdown didn't affect my earnings too much. I was working from home and getting my income as usual. The only thing was that we were locked in our apartment for continuous 3 months. Finally, the first phase came to an end, and everything started to open slowly. The restrictions were also partially lifted, and now we could go outside. After being locked in our apartment, everyone wanted to go out and take some fresh air, but we had to be on alert because the threat was not over yet. It was the first day when the restrictions were lifted, and my family, especially my kids, started to force me to take them out. I was afraid to plan for any trip, but was helpless in front of them. I knew they had also been locked in the same cage for continuous 3 months, and now they wanted to fly. They were kids, and roaming around and playing was in their nature. But thanks to the lockdown, they missed the whole 3 months of waiting until the day when the lockdown would be lifted. Now it was the time, and they were begging me to take them out. I tried hard to convince them, but they didn't listen to me even once. Finally, my wife also came in with their support and said to me that she also wanted to go somewhere. I knew that we were in danger of being affected by Corona, so I was not ready to take them, but I had no other option. So I agreed, but on the condition that we would only go to some restaurant which was in the nearby area. They were not too happy, but they had no other option, so they agreed. I asked them to decide on the spot while I get fresh. I went to my room and got fresh. When I returned to the hall, my kids were running to me and told me that they had decided on the location. I asked them about it, and they told me that they wanted to go to the Dominos, which was only a few miles away from my home. I agreed to this and asked them to get ready along with their mom. They were very happy and excited, so they changed into new clothes and returned back to me within 10 minutes. As usual, it was my wife who was late, as she took a lot of time getting ready. We waited for her, and after the next 15 minutes, she returned. I knew she made us wait too long, but after watching her, I thought my wait was worth it. She looked so beautiful that I kept on looking at her until my kids pulled my hand and asked me to go. We went to the parking lot, and from there to the Dominos. I was not too far away, so we reached there in 10 minutes. We went there and grabbed a seat. I took the menu and asked my kids to select what they wanted. They told me their choice, and I ordered them. After ordering, I came back to my seat and waited for my order to be prepared. I was looking here and there when I noticed a girl sitting in another corner who looked stressed and was crying while hiding her face. I was looking at her, and when my wife noticed me, she asked me if something was wrong, and I told her about that girl. My wife was too kind, so she stood us up and went to that girl to ask her if something was wrong with her. She told her that she had a breakup with her boyfriend, and that's why she was sad. My wife calmed her down and made her believe that everything would be all right. After 5 minutes of chatting with her, she returned to us and explained everything to me. My kids were waiting desperately for their order to arrive, but it was taking too long. I went to the counter and asked them why my order was late. They replied that they were short-staffed and that if it was the first day to open after lockdown, they apologized to me and told me that they would prepare my order soon. I understood their problem because the pandemic had affected everyone equally. I went back to my seat and waited. I was looking at my phone when I heard some commotion. I looked outside and saw 2 guys running inside the store. They had pistols in their hands and were wearing masks to hide their faces. They came in and looked toward everyone, and just after that, they ran to the girl who was sitting in the corner. They went to her and grabbed her hair and threw her on the ground. I wanted to help that girl, but my wife stopped me. She was afraid because they had guns with them, and they could have harmed me or the kids, so I remained sitting there. They started slapping and kicking the girl. She was begging them to leave her, but they were merciless beasts. One of them held her by her neck, and the second one placed the gun on her chest. Before anyone could think anything, he pulled the trigger and banged. I couldn't believe my eyes. They actually shot that girl in front of my eyes. I looked toward my kids. They were completely scared and were shaking in their toes. I was also too scared. The girl was bleeding continuously, and they threw her into a corner and ran outside the store. I wanted to help the girl, but I was frozen in my seat and couldn't move my body. My wife shook me and asked me to call the cops. I thought that it would be a good idea and pulled out my phone to call the cops, but suddenly I heard a voice that asked me to stop and not to call the police. I looked here and there to look for the lady who asked me to stop, and I was shocked to see that the girl who had been shot a moment ago was standing in front of me and asking me not to call the cops. I could clearly see that she was bleeding continuously, and her dress was soaked in blood. My wife stood up and held her, and asked whether she was okay or not, but she was completely okay and was smiling. I couldn't understand what was going on there. My wife asked her why she stopped them from calling the cops, and that was when she told us that what we saw a moment ago was just a play, and they were shooting a documentary for their project. I was surprised to hear that and couldn't believe my ears, but then I saw those 2 guys coming through the gate again, and this time without any mask. They were having a camera inside of a gun this time. They came and hugged the girl. After this, they explained the whole scenario and told us that they were brothers and sisters. Everyone except us in the store knew about this already, but they wanted to capture some real reaction from the audience, so they didn't tell us anything. They apologized to us for our inconvenience and for scaring us, and then left while thanking everyone there. I was in shock even now that what I was really scared of turned out to be a play, and that play almost took my soul out of my body. Many of us will be familiar with the Bloody Mary urban legend, the idea that if you look into a mirror and say her name a certain number of times, the malevolent phantom known as Bloody Mary will materialize to murder you. Some might say that the movie series The Candyman borrowed the concept, having the protagonist stare into a mirror while repeating the titular character's name as a means to summon him. It's certainly a terrifying trope. The idea of staring into a mirror only for someone or something to suddenly appear behind you. It's enough to make even the bravest of us shiver. but no one's ever just appeared out of someone's mirror to merge them, right? And those of you who wish to remain in blissful ignorance, I implore you, stop listening right now. But for the rest of you who don't mind being a little paranoid for the next couple of days, let me introduce you to the story of Ruthie Mae McCoy at around 8:45 on April 22nd of 1987. Ruthie Mae McCoy made a 911 call from the 11th floor Avett apartment on West 13th Street, Chicago. After the police dispatcher asked Ruthie what manner of assistance she required, he found response to be incredibly perplexing, and in fact, Ruthie told them that someone was trying to get into her home via the bathroom cabinet. They want to break in. He asked from where they want to come. "Through my bathroom," Ruthie replied. "I'm on the other side. They're trying to reach in through my bathroom cabinet." The dispatcher had already established it, and Ruthie was on the 11th floor of a 13th Street high-rise. There was no way anyone was climbing through her bathroom window, and absolutely no way of them using her bathroom cabinet of some kind of doorway. The dispatcher was most certainly concerned with the safety, but it seemed to them the biggest threat to our well-being was herself. She sounded frightened. That much was certain. But if she truly believed that people were trying to break into her apartment through her bathroom cabinet, she must have been having some kind of mental breakdown. The dispatcher told Ruthie that the cops are on their way, but he logged the call as a disturbance with a neighbor as opposed to an assault in progress. It wasn't a high priority call, but the cops would get there eventually to check up on her. And the cops finally arrived at Ruthie's apartment. They knocked on the door but received no reply. After their knocks went unanswered, the police attempted to enter the apartment using a key given to them by the attendant in the housing office, but left on the key failed to unlock the door. The next evening, Chicago PD received a call from one of Ruth, his neighbors, who was worried about her whereabouts considering she had seen police at her door the night before, and still had not seen Ruthie. Chicago police and Chicago Housing Authority security guards arrived back at McCoy's apartment shortly after, and after the knocks and calls from McCoy went unanswered, officers suggested breaking down the door, but unbelievably were prevented from doing so by the CHA security guards, who told them they'd sue the city for damages if they got fired from their jobs. The following evening, pressures from the cops forced the Chicago Housing Authority to act, and they sent over represented with a carpenter who drilled the lock on the door. It was then that they made a horrifying discovery: the dead, decaying body of Ruthie Mae McCoy. Homicide detectives discovered that she had been shot in her left shoulder, thigh, and right side of her abdomen, and right upper arm, and also became obvious that whoever had shot Ruthie Mae was known to her, and was able to gain access to her apartment without breaking and entering. He had to discover that Ruthie had locked her door from the inside, and the key was so on its hook near the threshold. So how would they gotten in and out of the apartment? Detectives reviewed the 911 call Ruthie made on the night of her death. When she mentioned her killer is trying to get him through the bathroom cabinet, a deep chill fell over the two men. It was impossible, like something out of a horror movie. But there had to be a rational explanation for Ruthie was saying that she was obviously not imagining anyone in her mirror. Detectives returned to the scene of the crime, intent on fully analyzing this bathroom cabinet that Ruth had mentioned. To the naked eye, it appeared to be a regular bathroom cabinet, mirror door sterile white, inside dotted with cosmetics and medicine. There were no secret doors inside of it, and there was certainly no supernatural portals to hellish otherworldly realms in a show of mild frustration. One of the detectives either shook or struck the cabinet, only for each of them to notice something curious about it. It visibly shifted. We can imagine the moment one detective sang, looking at the other with surprise before returning to shift the cabinet again. Before long, they discovered that they could do more than just shift the thing. They could remove it entirely, revealing a gaping hole in the wall. As it turned out, The ABLA projects, which Ruthie called home, was a rather unusual architectural quirk built into it, and that certain apartments connected to one another via a narrow tunnel that ran behind the bathroom cabinets of opposite apartments. This design was intended to provide easy access to plumbing fixtures if maintenance was ever needed. In some cases, apartments above and below each other were also connected by similar means. Granted, this made trace men's lives much easier, but also provided easier access for burglars and also nefarious types, as the bathroom medicine cabinets were easily removable from each end. A person could simply remove the cabinet from the wall of the apartment they were in, crawl in the narrow passage through a pipe chase, and push in the cabinet of the unit they were trying to access. Break-ins via this method had been going on in the ABLA projects for quite a while by the time of Bertha's murder, to the extent where residents put furniture in front of the bathroom doors to tie them with rope before going to bed. It was obviously a huge problem, but one that was completely overlooked in the construction of the housing projects, until the Chicago Housing Authority could find the money to fix it. Residents were told to simply make do. Ruthie's apartment number 11 or 9 happened to be connected to number 11. Oh wait, and this is obviously where her killers emerged from. Number 11, oh wait, was indeed being rented at the time, and it's believed that the 10 on record was actually a drug dealer who allowed his customers to use the apartment as a drug den. The shitty drug-using types must have either entered or heard about the flaw in the architecture, and decided to use it to their advantage. To Alba residents Ted Turner, then age 18 and 21-year-old named John Honduras, were charged with murder, home invasion, armed robbery, armed violence, and residential burglary. The number of witnesses claimed they saw the two men carrying McCoy's 19-inch color TV and rocking chair around the projects in the hours following ruthless murder. After years of arrests and continuing investigation, the charges against the two men were dropped due to lack of investigation, and the Ruthie killers were never officially charged or imprisoned. Even without the supernatural element, the idea of someone being able to bang the break into your apartment via what amounts to a secret passage is absolutely terrifying. There are few of us ever seen the blueprints of the apartment buildings or houses that we live in, and even fewer actually interested in doing so. And so how do you know for certain that there isn't some kind of secret entrance to your apartment? And if there is, how do you know there isn't someone sneaking along in right this instant, ready to jump out on some poor, unsuspecting, scary story fan to give them their own personal horror story?